Yes, Apeksha, we are live.
Okay, cool. Um, all right, so officially welcome everybody to this session of Yuva Samvad on the eve of our India and Pakistan's 75th birthday. Um, and I've been thinking a lot about what this conversation should be like. We have a few folks who have joined from India and a few folks from Pakistan, and these are always the best kind of conversations that happen across borders. But I've really been thinking about how we want to have this conversation and in what terms, and especially because it's like a landmark kind of moment. And when Meera first reached out to me for this conversation, she said, we want to talk about friendship, struggle, and solidarity. And that is a topic that is very close to my heart for reasons I will just divulge in a moment. But, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe as much as I love the idiom of friendship, maybe it's not enough when we talk about the relationship between India and Pakistan. And the more I've thought about it, the more I feel like the idiom that actually makes sense to me is the idiom of family. Uh, you know, and and the eve at which we are meeting is the eve of the birthday of these twin nations, these twin brothers, sisters, whatever gender we want to attribute to our countries. But that that we're at the birthday celebration of these two twins, and then I thought, okay, they're 75, so it's kind of like we're at the birthday celebration of our grandfathers. And these grandfathers or grandmothers who have had a massive falling apart at some point in their life. But we seem to be cousins who get along really well, and just kind of have a great time with each other. So, how are we going to how are we going to be at this celebration of grandparents who don't seem to get along and cousins and siblings who do? And I also come at this idiom from a very personal experience which I would like to share. And it is about a friend or a family member I met 11 years ago at when I went for my masters to the UK. And we kind of met like on the first orientation day, and I remember seeing him across the room and being like, yeah, this guy looks really familiar. And yeah, familiar is the word. He looked familiar. He looked like, yeah, I probably know someone like him in my life, and he might be easy to talk to. And in a bunch of people who were completely alien, it felt kind of nice to be around someone familiar. And and we got to talking, and I expected him to say he's from like Bangalore or Delhi or something like that, except he said he's from Islamabad. And so I said, okay, cool. And then the first thought in my head was like, ooh, a Pakistani, like so exotic. But at the same time, it was like, yeah, I mean, it of course makes sense that, you look exactly like me. You look so familiar, but you are, of a different nationality. And through the course of a year at IDS for our masters, we were constantly having this conversation where it was like, oh, हमारे घर पे ऐसा होता है, आपके घर पे कैसा होता है, except that the घर was country. So, our music is like this, what's your music like? Our food is like this, what's your food like? Oh, is it the same with your politicians as well? And is this the same law that was passed at your parliament in the way that it was passed at our parliament? And, we were constantly kind of comparing notes about everything, the smallest and the biggest thing. And we were always finding our experiences reflecting in each other. Our conundrums, our dilemmas reflecting in each other. We were even lucky at some point because they were able to come down to India for a conference, one of the lucky few. And they crossed over at Wagah border, and we were even joking about, oh, are the trucks more colorful on that side or this side? Because it was just like, oh my god, it's exactly the same. It looks like the same. There is one line of trucks on that side and one line of trucks on this side. And I mean, it's ridiculous that they are not the same country. And yeah, I think that for us, it's been 11 years of constantly having this conversation, of constantly making sense, not just of the external political environment, but also the way that movements play out internally. You know, we've had similar struggles within movements. We've had similar questions of like, okay, so what does it mean, to ask these questions and not these ones, or, inter movement struggles and solidarities and jaddojahads. And so, yeah, I feel that, I mean, yeah, while I do consider him my friend, I do think that he is much more than that, and we've always known that. We've always acknowledged that it's more that what we feel for each other is family. And the moment you say the word family, of course there's that feminist in all of us that says no, family is just a patriarchal institution, and how, like, let's stick to friends, it's so much more secular and it's so much safer, and it's so, it's kind of, it's nicer, like the minute you bring in family, then you bring in all of this other baggage. But at the same time, I feel that when you say family, you also acknowledge a deep bond with another person, and you acknowledge that, well, actually, this is not someone I can, even if I wish to completely get rid of, I will always be connected to this person, even if my connection is fraught, even if we are fighting all the time, even if, we can sometimes really hate each other's guts. But we still continue to be connected, and we still continue to make sense of ourselves in relation to each other. And of course, the right wing does that in the worst possible way, because it makes them the bad guys, and it, on both sides. In fact, it's not even just one side that does it; both sides do it. Makes the other the bad guy, makes the other the worst enemy, makes the other the reason why we are suffering, even though that might not really have any basis in actual reality. It's just like this very charged psychic notion of you are the cause of all our suffering. But that itself is an acknowledgement of the fact that you continue to be important to me. You continue to have an impact in my life and in all of our psychic realities, in all of our consciousness. And I think that for me, at this moment in our journeys as twin countries, the question that comes to my mind is, so what does it mean to be family, and then to heal those bonds of family that we have with each other? What does it mean to actually acknowledge those bonds? What does it mean to heal those bonds? And yeah, I think that is the question with which I want to open the floor. And of course, I want to introduce the panelists that we have today. First, Ammar, who is my family and my friend from 11 years or some lifetimes, who knows, who is also the Punjab president of Awami Workers Party, and a researcher and a musician. I want to introduce Shahram, who has joined, though I suspect it's very early in the morning for you as well, Shahram. Shahram is a professor of economics at, hang on, I've got this written down, just for one moment, at Bucknell University, and also a musician and the founder member of LAL. And I'm thrilled to be able to meet you today because, one of the first few songs that Ammar shared with me was Ummeede Seher Ki Baat, and we like heard it again and again and again. So it's just wonderful to have you here in this room. I want to introduce Vedi, Sinha and the Avahan project, and looking forward to their really, really brilliant musical contributions. And Priyanka, who is here from SAPAN, which is a coalition of peace activists that organize free trade, travel and tourism between regions, South Asian region, especially India and Pakistan. And Ravi, who is the founder of an initiative called Aaghaz-e-Dosti, which tries to foster friendship between India and Pakistan. Have I covered everybody or have I missed someone? And Guddi, who is not yet here, but when she is, I will introduce her too. So, Ammar, over to you. I think that the question that I want you to speak to is the one that you also wanted to talk about, of what it would mean for us to heal these bonds at this moment in our histories.
Thank you so much, Apeksha, for that beautiful introduction and a very personal one. And it's rare that such conversations between India and Pakistan start off on such personal notes, because the sad reality is that very few of us, at least now in our generation and those younger than us, have had these opportunities for personal interactions with the other. And it's gotten increasingly rare. And and I also appreciate that you use the idiom of family to begin this conversation, and that rings really true for anyone who has experienced the other Pakistanis and Indians who've been with each other in other contexts around the world, or those of us who've been lucky enough to travel to the other country and experience the hospitality of the other. And the thing that most readily comes to mind in such situations is family. And indeed, that is what we experienced in that beautiful time when we were together in IDS. And it was indeed like it was a sense of like recognition of meeting someone that you feel you have always known, but you have never, like a family member who's been estranged or something that you've never really had the chance to encounter, and you're finally getting to know them and realizing what it is that you missed out on for so long. And that feeling of recognition endures whenever these encounters take place, whether it's in real life or in these online mediums. And I suppose the other way in which the idiom of family also makes sense is when you look at uh, India and Pakistan through the lens of trauma, which is something that I've I have personally, and I know that you, Apeksha, also have in recent years tried to understand, in the sense that we are two peoples who have experienced extremely traumatic histories um, that are inextricably tied to each other, and histories of trauma that sort of live on and endure in our societies, in our politics, in the many inequalities that dot our societies, in the conflicts that continue both between us and within our countries, in how we treat the people of our own countries. Um, in a sense, our realities, our present day realities, are very much informed by those traumas, and in very similar ways, in many ways, to how individually many of us are often are also traumatized human beings, as so much of like a lot of psychological research is telling us today about how so much of our physical and mental health is informed by the childhood traumas that we experience in the early parts of our life, and how they sort of indelibly impact how it is that we go through life and how we react to situations, and how our physical and mental health sort of changes over time. And in the vast majority of cases, those childhood traumas are caused by our families also. They're caused by people who took care of us often, people who we grew up with, people who we our families with, people who were supposed to take care of us but maybe didn't in many ways. And then that sort of indelibly changed who we were. And it's very similar, I feel, in the case of our countries and the communities that live within those countries. And when we speak of, for instance, nationalism, which supposedly is a dividing line between India and Pakistan, if you really look at the discourses and the narratives of the nationalisms that sort of animate our politics on either side of the border, essentially what those nationalisms often are, especially when they relate to the other, they are tales of grievance. They're tales of blame, and they're tales of pain that were caused by the other side. They can be historical traumas about, say, the subjugation supposedly of indigenous population of India by Muslim invaders, of whom like modern day Muslims are seen as representatives or continuations of, or they can be stories of the subjugation uh, the, of Muslim populations under periods of Hindu rule in the subcontinent, or under in Pakistan, there's often stories about what happened when Congress formed ministries in the 30s and what that did. And then obviously there's the actual events around partition, in which obviously millions of people died, one of the greatest instances of mass murder in the history of the subcontinent, in the history of the planet, really, and how those sorts of stories continue to live on. And and even after that, I mean, all the wars that we fought, all the thousands who've gone and died for each of our countries, and what also we've done within our countries, in the ways in which the horrors of partition, I mean, in similar ways to how sort of the memories and the traumas of the Holocaust live on in the subjugation of the Palestinian people. Um, similarly, like the traumas and horrors of partition and what preceded it live on in the subjugation of the people of Kashmir, people of Balochistan, of the various people's movements on either side of the border that continue to be stamped on by the boots of our respective states, in the various caste and class and ethnic inequalities, and the authoritarian responses of our state apparatuses to whenever those um, grievances are articulated by people within our countries. So we continue to sort of perpetuate and make these traumas sort of endure within our lives. And I think one of the main reasons for that is, one of the main reasons that it happens in our countries, say in more than in many other parts of the world, is because our traumas are often unacknowledged. Our traumas, particularly those that come with each other, are often swept under the carpet of the expression of these nationalisms. We subsume our traumas in various other forms and express them in other forms, and especially invest, and we've invested in them. We've invested these traumas in the building of our national and ethnic and religious identities, and they've become infused and inscribed into our state narratives and state histories, and how our states choose to identify themselves increasingly. So this is a very complex web, and it's a very difficult web to untangle. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that it's not really, I mean, for us, say for you and me, Apeksha, I mean, we've experienced something, we've experienced the communion, the love, the recognition that can come from spending time with the other and recognizing that the differences that we imagined are actually not as great as we were always told they were. But for most people from our countries, that opportunity has not existed, and has increasingly been even limited over time. I mean, I remember coming to India in 2014. It was already quite fortunate, and since then, it's become increasingly impossible to even conceive of visiting, and similarly for receiving visitors from India. So I think so. The first step is really acknowledging the reality of these many layers of traumas that have that dot our histories and the reality of our present, and understanding what they mean to the people of our countries, that we cannot simply wish them away, and in fact that would be the worst thing to do, to simply pretend that they don't exist. So I think the first step really needs to be to acknowledge the horrors of our history, acknowledge the horrors of our past. And whether you are an individual, whether you're a society or a community or a collective, the first step always has to begin with acknowledgement. And in our cases, of course, it has to be a sort of mutual collective acknowledgement um, of what has happened in the past and how it continues to affect the present. Um, it has to also be an acknowledgement that we cannot really change the past. We cannot really undo what we or our ancestors have done to each other. Um, so those wounds are real, and their effects are real. So um, we have to make our peace with that past by acknowledging it, by understanding what it did to us. And then we also have to then deal with our identities as they exist now. Um, a lot of people, I brought this up before on Twitter about how, like, acknowledging that, partition really changed things, and it really uh, affected politics on either side of the border as it existed. And a lot of people get upset. I remember when I said this on Twitter once, they said, "Oh well, RSS existed before as well," and it's not like a lot of Kashmiris, for instance, were upset at me for saying that because these pogroms also existed before partition, and you cannot simply um, attribute what we are experiencing to simply that particular act. And similarly, I mean, as many people on the other side of the border in India say things like, "Oh, no, but you Muslims are always like this. I mean, you've always been invaders, and you've always um, been trying to subjugate us." And I mean, and there are kernels of truth to all this. Of course, it's not like history started with partition or history started with Hindu-Muslim communal riots in the 20th century. Um, but nonetheless, I think there is what happened around 75 years ago, and how did those processes became inextricably intertwined with state building in the subcontinent. I think that the impact of that was far more than what any sort of communal disharmony from the past several centuries could have accomplished, especially when you factor in things like nuclearization, when you factor in things like the modern digital age development of like sort of communal identity into these really fascistic sort of forms that can like take spark at any given moment. I think these things have taken on really, really gargantuan proportions, and in the minds of many people, um, this is the sort of like be all and end all. It's become the be all and end all of their identity. In the minds of many in India, the imaginaries of a Hindu Rashtra, and creating what it really seems to me to be like a mirror image of Pakistan, of the Islamic state in India, and in the minds of many on the right wing in Pakistan, the penultimate objective of like a Ghazwa-e-Hind, when the Muslims will conquer India as the glory days used to be. So like there's a sense in which uh, it is the possibilities exist today of these traumas being mobilized into something scarier than we have ever imagined, in complete with all the sort of accoutrements of like modern day uh, digital uh, uh, fascism. So it's really important for those who can, those of us who have had the opportunities to experience the other in a way that doesn't give way to these sorts of impulses, uh, to begin to try and unpack how it is that we got here, and to speak to those, and it's very critical on either sides of our border, to speak to those who do buy into these identities and who do buy into these narratives of eternal war and eternal conflict, and to be able to acknowledge their hurt, their grievances, because in all of them there are kernels of truth, and to be able to talk about, once we acknowledge them is only when we can move towards healing. Um, because so much, I mean, and you hear this when you read about uh, trauma in individuals. So much of traumatic feelings are born about from the anxiety of keeping trauma repressed. from the parts of you that are continuing to try and not really acknowledge the hurt and the pain that you went through, or not seeing others acknowledge what you went through. So you keep on reenacting it in your head, in your mind, or in our cases, in our societies and in our politics. So we have to stop. We have to stop repressing them. We have to be able to speak of them openly. We have to be able to mention what it is openly, instead of just like pretending we can just, just again wish them away. How we can do that? I mean, as anyone's guess, I'm happy to talk about strategies. Obviously, I feel like there's no real substitute for being able to really meet, for being able to talk with each other. And I feel like that's where the right wing has been most effective, by shutting ourselves off from each other. Because you really, I mean, the memories of when I went to India, the welcome I received, they're not just from like friends like Apeksha, but just from like general people on the street whenever they found out I was Pakistani. Those memories will always stay with me, and they will always inform how it is that I personally engage with the question of India and Pakistan. Those memories need to be created for millions of other people. And once those people on either sides of the border have experienced them, it will become all the more easy to push back against these narratives of eternal conflict. Um, we need to recover those familial bonds that we once had, and I feel like that is an essential part of what we, going back to the idiom of family that Apeksha mentioned, like an essential part of, I think, what makes our politics on either side so toxic, which pushes us towards fascism on either side of the border, is that we have cut ourselves off from a part of us. We have cut ourselves off from a part of what makes us whole, from a part of whether, for instance, whether um, India likes it, many on the right wing in India like it or not, the Muslims of the subcontinent are an integral part of the Indian story. We like they have been here for centuries, and they've been part of what makes this society, of what makes the society of the subcontinent Indian. And whether people in the right wing Pakistan like it or not, we are very indelibly Indian also. However much we try to carve out a separate identity for ourselves, the histories and of this part of the world of South Asia, of the Indian subcontinent, run through our blood as much as they run through the blood of people on the other side of the border. So the more we continue to try to cut ourselves off from that part of our identity, the more we will alienate ourselves from ourselves, and continue to repress a part of us and make ourselves ever so less human than we actually are. So I'll stop there. There's other people on the panel. And happy to have this conversation, and hope to have many more like this in the coming years.
Thanks, Ammar. Those, yeah, I think you've really like set the tone for the conversation. And yeah, I think that piece about recognizing that we are connected as much as that connection hurts, and that we are very much constituted of each other, is a really important part, at least of my own journey with, growing up in India, where you're raised as a patriotic person, and every school teaches you to be patriotic, and there is that, I mean, it's like really in your blood to be patriotic and feel a certain way about Pakistan. And even if you don't buy into feeling about Pakistan in a certain way, or even if you may say, no, 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 it's fine, like I don't want to have animosity, most often, the at least until we met, until, and it was not just you and me, right? It was also like all of your friends and all of us, and all of us coming together. And until we met, until that community became a real human flesh and blood type of thing in my mind, it was easy to not have to have it present in my mind that Pakistan exists. And it's something that has really shifted in me. So Ammar's best friend from childhood, Anis, he once said to me, he said, Pakistan and India are like estranged brothers. That was the idiom he had said, all those years back. And he said that Pakistan, and at that time India was of course in a very different place than it is right now, and so was Pakistan. And he said that Pakistan is like the the difficult brother, the brother who who is in a bad state right now, and India is flourishing. It's the brother that's in a good state, and the only way India can continue to flourish is if it cuts out the idea of Pakistan from its mind. Which of course we've not been able to do, which is how we also are at the place that we are right now. But he said that, and at that time I didn't think much of it. But then when I after I came back to India, when I heard the national anthem for the first time, it struck me that in this moment to celebrate India is also to recognize it is not Pakistan. And until then that was just like, obviously it's not Pakistan, but in that moment it was a realization that that means I am separated from all of these people that I love and feel community with. And I think that just that simple realization really shifted something very fundamentally in me, in how I feel about a lot of things. So you're absolutely right in that there is no other alternative to actually connecting in flesh and blood and being able to feel those things in real life for us to even be able to heal. And I want to now ask Priyanka if she'd like to speak, because I know that Priyanka's work is very much about this, bringing connections, having people meet, trying to connect.
Hi. So I'm sorry, you'll have to bear with my cough and my voice a bit. So firstly, just to correct on that, I'm a researcher, I work in data analytics centrally, and I volunteer with SAPAN. There are actually many people here in this meeting also who are SAPAN, like Ravi, Nitesh and SAPAN, Fausia and Admiral Ramdas and Lalita Ramdas. They are like very fundamental to SAPAN. I don't know if Shahram's here. Shahram's also SAPAN. So SAPAN is, I so I was not completely sure of where to begin with. So I'll pick up from what Apeksha you spoke about, then Ammar spoke about. So when we are talking about, referring to India and Pakistan here, so there is a shared history which is there, a shared history with, and in a way that culturally, socially, economically, India and Pakistan are very closely intertwined. And there is the legacy of colonial past that carries. I'm sorry, I'm having a. Can I? Can I just?
Priyanka, would you like to go later, if once you're feeling a little bit better?
Sure.
Okay. Cool. Okay. In that case, Vedi, would you guys like to? Super.
Shall we? So, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. It gives so much needed hope in times that are today, and taking from the conversation that has been building up until now, I can talk from my personal journey. And a couple of years ago, as Avahan began, I sort of started chasing this idea that's very culturally rooted in, I thought, my country. And that's where I began. I began with an idea of love and Nirgun, and that started to take me to so much more. And I realized today that even in life, to complete this journey and find the real roots to a lot of my conversations, a lot of my questions, is a part of both the countries that are today. Because culturally, we've been so I don't know if there's a word that I have. It's like a couple of years ago, my sister and I, coming from very different approaches, her development and social work approach and my Nirgun approach, we started conflicting, and with all this information, we started sort of breaking apart in terms of how we connected. However, the years that we were able to take journeys of our own, we found information, knowledge of our own, we realized that our conversation is the same, and we sort of came back together. What frustrates me today is that 75 years later today, as we have so much information and technology, we have so much connection that's possible with the technology. Our politics is becoming more and more about creating countries, turning countries into businesses. And that, on another level, is taking apart whatever little coming back that people are trying. People, communities, human beings are trying, but structures are pulling them apart as much as they can. And so ultimately, we are artists. All that we know to do is expressed through our music. So we will try to share a little bit of that frustration, a little bit of that despair, but also a little bit of that hope that came and comes with this journey, and hope that somewhere it connects to all of us. माया मन का मंदिर घंटा सबका बड़ा है ज्ञान, क्यों कहे भिखारी प्रजा और जनता डरिया सांसद में अब जा। ओ देखो साथी राजा लगाए ध्यान, तो बोलो साथी कौन बचाए जान। माया मन का मंदिर घंटा सबका बड़ा है ज्ञान, क्यों के भिखारी प्रजा और जनता डरिया सांसद में अब जा। ओ देखो साथी राजा लगाए ध्यान, तो बोलो साथी कौन बचाए जान। सबका बड़ा है ज्ञान, क्यों कहे भिखारी प्रजा
Wow. Thank you so much. That was just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Um, I also just wanted to, I don't know if you have more songs, but I also wanted to introduce Sumant. Sumant is part of the Avahan project, Sumant Balakrishnan and Vedi Sinha. And Vedi, before the session, I was reading up about Avahan to write up the intro. And I read how you have a twin sister, and it was just so beautiful to me that you spoke about your disconnection and connection with her as part of this, because it's almost like, yeah, we are also twins, the India and Pakistan story, and the possibility of reconnecting back. And you brought up Nirgun, and and of course I know that that alludes also to a spiritual journey, you know and yeah, I think that, it's also for Ammar and me, it's been a really important part of our conversation to like connect back to our spiritual roots as well, as part of the possibility of healing, finding peace, and reconnecting with each other. So thank you so much for bringing all of that into this one really beautiful song.
Thank you so much. And my twin is called Pakhi, and she so much wanted to be here, but because of certain work processes, it was just not possible this time. But yes, I think it is similar, no, much like our very personal relationships, our very social spaces also, our families, like Ammar also said that हम सब हमारे परिवारों ने भी हमें बहुत ट्रॉमा दिया है हमारे आई रेड एन आर्टिकल और उसमें ऐसा लिखा था कि मतलब इट्स इम्पॉसिबल टू नॉट ट्रॉमेटाइज योर चाइल्ड एज अ पेरेंट क्योंकि हम सब अपना अपना रास्ता ढूंढ रहे हैं गिर रहे हैं एंड देन देयर इज दिस ओवरआर्चिंग organized politics that is always moving forward with one single agenda, and the agenda seems rather scary now. And so I do feel like with so much information, with so much technology, when we could go back to our core, these setups are trying so hard to not let that happen. But also when I see this space, I feel hope, and it feels like over the years, maybe we can make it happen. Maybe all of us can make it happen. If there is time, we have 2 quick songs that we'd like to share.
Yes, please. We are all desperate to hear them.
So then the next song that we'll hear is a little bit a song. The first song is more rage, more how one feels towards these structures and massive spaces, but then comes a space of despair, comes a space where one doesn't know where to go, and before comes the hope and actionables. One needs to also live that, as we were discussing, understand, accept that we all have these traumas that are inside of us already. And once we recognize that, maybe it'll be more possible to connect, reconnect, and move forward. So the next song that we're sharing is called Jaane De. And with the hope that we can. So Jaane De is for all societal conversations that I hear. If हर वो चीज़ जो मुझे वो करने से रोकती है, जो मैं करना चाहती हूँ, जो प्यार है, उस सबको hopefully. डगमग करे मन भीतर कर डरे जी करे धुक धुक, अब मत रुक सखी जाने दे। जग करे शुर सके मन मत मोड़ सके, जानू कठिन लगे प्रेम हर मोड़ सकी जाने दे। जाने अब पथ सकी तैयार रथ सकी, जानू लगे अनजान राह कथ सकी जाने दे। प्रलय का आना, दीवारों का धंस जाना, पैरों तले जमीन का खिसकना, चलते चलते पहिए का लड़खड़ाना और फिर टूट जाना, या फिर मटका निकालते हुए सिल का रगड़ा जाना। बसंत आने से पहले बसंत आने के लिए पत्तों का मुरझाना और फिर झड़ जाना। जग बती आए सके जग समझ आए सके, तू चले प्रेम पथ जग कतराए सखी जाने दे। चल सखी पथ पर आलिए रथ चल वे कहें द्वेष तू, प्रेम टल सखी जाने दे। पथ पर आलिए रथ चल वे कहें द्वेष तू, प्रेम अटल सखी जाने दे। तो आशा ये है कि ऐसी मुलाकातें होती रहें और ऑनलाइन से ये ऑफलाइन हो जाएं और हम सब मिलें, मैं इन सभी खूबसूरत लोगों को कस के पकड़ सकूं और बहुत बतिया सकूं। The hope is to connect further, create more spaces, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. So thank you for having us and thank you for making us a part of this.
Thank you so much for taking this time to come also, because I know you have another very important conversation to be part of. And I was also thinking that we should remember him in this moment also, because उमर खालिद के 700 दिन इनकार्सरेशन के हो रहे हैं और इस मोमेंट में जब हम मुल्क की फ्रीडम के बारे में बात करते हैं तो इन अनफ्रीडम्स के बारे में भी उतना ही ज़रूरी है बात करना कि what it means for Umar to be behind bars at this moment, and how we can send him the love and solidarity from both sides of the border, I suppose. Vedi, do you want to have one last song or you're good for now?
I think we've taken too much time already. I would quickly like to, although मैं जल्दी से एक थोड़ा brief सा introduction करना चाहूँगी आवान project
Yes, please.
ने बात की. Sumant here has a project called Dastan Live. दास्तान लाइव भी बहुत एक्टिवली इन कॉन्वर्जेशंस को एक बहुत अलग तरीके से, एक बहुत अलग अप्रोच के साथ कर रहा है. एंड इन फैक्ट इन सो मेनी वेज दास्तान लाइव हैज बीन एन इंस्पिरेशन, a teacher, and Sumant has been an inspiration and a teacher to whatever I'm also doing or trying to do. So I just wanted to quickly thank him and introduce him to all of you. एंड आज ज़्यादा समय नहीं लेते हुए फिर से मुलाकात हो इसकी आशा के साथ वीड लाइक टू से थैंक यू.
Thank you, Sumant. Thank you, Vedi. Thank you so much. This is just, yeah, this is just the exact thing we needed in this moment. Thank you. Okay, Priyanka, I want to check in with you again if you're feeling up to speaking now. We also have a little bit of a problem because Shahram has gotten
Yeah, I
disconnected.
can speak. I mean, if I can speak a little later, I'm just having like ginger honey and warm water. So we'll just.
Okay, so then should we ask Ravi if Ravi you would like to speak now, and then once Priyanka's throat is a little better.
Yes, Apeksha.
Super.
Sure.
So Ravi, as I said earlier, is a founder of Aaghaz-e-Dosti and is doing exactly this very important work of building connections between these two familial, estranged families, let's put it like that. So Ravi, take it away.
थैंक यू अपेक्षा. बहुत सारी चीज़ें सुनी मैंने जो आपने बताई फैमिली और फ्रेंड के बारे में, या अम्मार ने जो बात की बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट कि रिकॉग्नाइज करें उन सारी जो सच्चाइयाँ हैं उसको, और आहवन प्रोजेक्ट ने जो अभी इतने बेहतरीन हमें नगमे सुनाए वो बिल्कुल दिल को छू गए सारी चीज़ें. और इंडो पाक एक ऐसा सब्जेक्ट है जिस पे बात करेंगे तो शायद बात पे बात निकलती जाएगी, बहुत सारी बातें होंगी. सबसे पहली बात जो मैं इसमें देखता हूँ वो ये देखता हूँ कि जो अली सरदार जाफरी साहब ने कहा था कि तुम आओ लाहौर से है चमन बरदोश, हम आए सुबह बनारस की रोशनी लेकर, हिमालय की हवाओं की ताजगी लेकर, और उसके बाद ये पूछें कि कौन दुश्मन है. तो मुझे लगता है कि जो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ है वो यही है कि दोनों तरफ के लोगों का एक दूसरे से मिलना नहीं हो पाता है, और इसलिए जो हमारे पास एक दूसरे के बारे में जो भी इंफॉर्मेशन आती है, जो भी बातें आती हैं, वो हमेशा सेकेंडरी सोर्सेस के थ्रू आती हैं. हमें मीडिया क्या बता रही है, हमें सुबह का अखबार क्या बता रहा है, हमें लोग क्या बता रहे हैं, वो सारे जो स्टीरियोटाइप्स हैं, और ख़ास तौर पे मीडिया और न्यूज़पेपर्स और ये सारी जो चीज़ें हैं जो एक दूसरे की तरफ की सिर्फ उन्हीं चीज़ों को बताती है जो निगेटिविटी को ज़्यादा प्रमोट करते हैं और फैलाते हैं. इसके पीछे उनके अपने जो भी वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट हैं, मैं उस पर नहीं जा रहा हूँ. लेकिन जो बात है वो ये है कि हमें किसी भी प्राइमरी सोर्स के थ्रू इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं मिल पाती, और ये इंफॉर्मेशन का ना मिलना, ये जो जनरेशन चली गई या जा रही है, या 75 ईयर्स में जिसने वो ड्रामा झेला है और वो धीरे धीरे खत्म हो रही है वो जनरेशन, लेकिन जो जनरेशन आ रही है उसके लिए ज्यादा खतरनाक है. क्योंकि मुझे ऐसा लगता है, मैं बहुत सारे ऐसे लोगों से मिला हूँ जो पार्टीशन के मतलब विटनेस रहे हैं, चश्मदीद गवाह रहे हैं, उन्होंने उस ड्रामा को झेला है, उनके दिल में वो दर्द है, लेकिन उनके दिल में नफरत नहीं है. मैं बहुत सारे ऐसे लोगों से मिला हूँ लेकिन उनके दिलों में मुझे नफरत नहीं मिली. वो जो जनरेशन थी उसके दिल में आज भी वो प्यार है. आप देखिए अभी लेटेस्ट एक आया था, वो रीना वर्मा जी 85 ईयर्स की हैं, जो कि 15 साल की उम्र में चली आई थी और वापस रावलपिंडी गई. उनके दिल में वो प्यार आज तक था, और वो कहती हैं कि मुझे जाने पे जो दर्द हुआ, आने पे उससे ज्यादा खुशी हो रही है. तो इस तरह की बहुत सारी ऐसी स्टोरीज हैं कि हमें पता चलता है कि वो जो दर्द है उनके अंदर, वो दर्द नफरत को जो है जन्म नहीं दे रहा. लेकिन जो पोस्ट पार्टीशन जनरेशन है, जो हमारी जनरेशन है, जो हम लोगों के बाद की जनरेशन है या जस्ट पहले की जनरेशन है, जिसने वो दर्द को झेला भी नहीं है, जो उस दर्द को ठीक से जानते भी नहीं है, उनके दिलों में एक हेट्रेड है, उनके दिलों में एक नफरत है. और वो नफरत इसी वजह से है क्योंकि एक तो वो पार्टीशन की जो चीजें हैं उसको उनके दिमाग में आज तक है, जैसा अम्मार कह रहे थे कि वो सारे ड्रामा को रिकॉग्नाइज करना जरूरी है, और दूसरा कि उनके पास जो इंफॉर्मेशन आ रही है वो इंफॉर्मेशन प्रॉपर नहीं है, वो सेकेंडरी सोर्सेज के थ्रू आ रही है। तो आगाज़े दोस्ती कुछ ऐसे काम करता है जैसे एक तो हम दोनों तरफ के बच्चों के क्लासरूम्स को कनेक्ट करते हैं आपस में एक दूसरे के साथ, तो उसमें हमें बहुत सारी चीजें देखने को मिलती हैं। जब हम बच्चों को कनेक्ट करते हैं और पहले बच्चों से बोलते हैं कि आप कभी किसी पाकिस्तानी से मिले हो, तो वो बताते हैं कि नहीं मिले हैं इंडिया में, और अगर वहां पूछते हैं तो वो किसी इंडियन से नहीं मिले हैं, और उनसे पूछा जाता है कि अच्छा आप क्या सोचते हो एक दूसरे के बारे में, तो वो वही निगेटिव चीजें बोलते हैं जो आमतौर पे हमारे आसपास के बच्चे या हमारी सोसाइटी के लोग जानते हैं, बोलते हैं। लेकिन जब हम उनको मिलाते हैं, जब वो वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग पे एक दूसरे से बात करते हैं, तो वो बात होते होते ऐसी हो जाती है कि 40-45 मिनट के सेशन को वो बच्चे बोलते हैं कि नहीं आप इसको और चलने दीजिए, या दोबारा हमें इस सेशन को और किसी तरह से फिर से करने दीजिए। वो आपस में उतनी देर में ही उनकी दोस्ती हो जाती है, उतनी देर में उनको मालूम चलने लग जाता है कि वो एक दूसरे जैसे दिखते हैं। मतलब एक बच्चा तो ये कहता है कि अरे वो तो हमारे जैसे दिख रहे हैं। तो मतलब ये भी एक बड़ी वैसी बात है, जैसे आपने भी कहा था अपेक्षा की जब आप वहां गई तो उसको देखा तो आपको लगा ये तो कोई इंडियन है। तो उस तरह से बहुत सारे ऐसे बच्चे हैं तो उनको लगता है कि वो तो हमारे जैसे दिख रहे हैं, तो हम कैसे उनसे नफरत कर सकते हैं। वो फेस्टिवल्स वही मना रहे हैं। पाकिस्तान के कई बच्चों को लगता है कि इंडिया में तो ईद बनती ही नहीं है, तो और जब यहाँ बच्चे मिलते हैं और वो कहते हैं नहीं हम मनाते हैं, ईद मनाते हैं, है ना, उनको पता है ईद के बारे में, तो उनको एक अलग खुशी होती है कि अरे वाह चलो मतलब जानते हैं वहां पे लोग। बातें करते हैं तो एक दूसरे की लैंग्वेज, अब आप जैसे हमने गुजरात साइड के एक स्कूल का सिंध साइड के एक स्कूल से जब कनेक्ट कराया, वो जिस लैंग्वेज में बात कर रहे थे वो लोकल लैंग्वेज थी। मतलब वो उन्होंने स्टार्टिंग की इंग्लिश और उससे फिर वो लोकल लैंग्वेज पे आ गए और वो दोनों समझ रहे थे एक दूसरे की बातें। मतलब वो लैंग्वेज मैं नहीं समझ पा रहा, मैं नॉर्थ इंडिया से हूँ, दिल्ली में बैठा हूँ, मुझे वो लैंग्वेज समझ नहीं आ रही, लेकिन वो पाकिस्तान के बच्चे को समझ में आ रही है। तो ये सब जो हमारी आइडेंटिटीज हैं, उन आइडेंटिटीज को कैसे हम जोड़ सकते हैं, क्योंकि आइडेंटिटी तोड़ने का भी जरिया हो सकती है और वो जोड़ने का भी जरिया हो सकती है। तो वो आइडेंटिटीज को हम कैसे जोड़ सकते हैं, एक तो इस पे मुझे लगता है कि हमें सबसे ज्यादा काम करने की जरूरत है। और जो 75 साल का ये मौका है कि 75 ईयर्स दोनों देश अपने इंडिपेंडेंस को कंप्लीट कर रहे हैं, तो इस मौके पे मतलब मेरा ये सोचना है कि इस 75 ईयर्स में दोनों देशों ने बहुत कुछ झेला है, एक दूसरे के साथ जंग भी करी है। हालांकि जंग के बाद भी 65 तक इतनी हेट्रेड नहीं थी एक दूसरे के देशों में, ये हेट्रेड ज्यादा बढ़ी तभी है जब हमारे एक दूसरे के आने जाने पे रोक लगाई गई। 65 तक इतनी रोक नहीं थी, उसके बाद ये जो वीजा प्रोसेसिंग और ये सारी चीजें कर दी गई, हम दुनिया के एक ऐसे इकलौते दो मुल्क बन गए जो एक दूसरे को सिटी स्पेसिफिक वीजा यूज कर रहे हैं। हम दुनिया के ऐसे दो मुल्क बन गए जो एक दूसरे को टेलीकॉम फैसिलिटी जो है वो शेयर नहीं कर रहे हैं। हमारे सिम पाकिस्तान में जाते बंद हो जाएंगे, दुनिया के किसी भी देश के सिम वहां पे जाने पे चलते रहेंगे। ऐसे किसी पाकिस्तानी का इंडिया में सिम बंद हो जाएगा, लेकिन किसी भी दूसरे देश का सिम हमारे यहाँ वो नेटवर्क चलता रहेगा। तो ये सब जो चीजें हैं, हमारे बीच जो ट्रेड है वो खत्म हो गया। अब हम थर्ड कंट्री ट्रेड कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हम एक दूसरे के साथ ट्रेड नहीं कर रहे। हमारे बीच जो मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग है वो बढ़ती गई। और ऐसा नहीं है कि ये कॉन्फ्लिक्ट 47 से था, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हमने कई बार बनाया भी है। आप सियाचिन को देखिए, 84 में स्टार्ट हुआ, वो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हमने बनाया है। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि वो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट शुरू से एग्जिस्ट कर रहा था, वहां दो लड़ाइयां हो गई, 47 हो गया, 62 हो गया, 65 हो गया, फिर 71 हो गया, इतनी सारी मतलब इंडो चाइना, इंडो बांग्लादेश, इंडो पाकिस्तान सारी चीजें हो गई, लेकिन सियाचिन पे तो कोई ऐसी दिक्कत नहीं आई थी। लेकिन फिर भी 84 में एक नया एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट वो बन गया और वो तब से लेके आज तक चल रहा है। दोनों देश तकरीबन $300 मिलियन उस पर हर साल दोनों देश खर्च कर रहे हैं। और इन सब की वजह से जो है लोगों के दिमाग में ये जो चीज़ है, और दोनों तरफ की जो सियासतें हैं, जो गवर्नमेंट है, जब मैं गवर्नमेंट की बात करता हूँ तो मैं गवर्नमेंट को हर तरीके से ये नहीं कहता, दोनों देशों की गवर्नमेंट को, कि ये बिल्कुल नकारा है या बिल्कुल खराब है, मैं ऐसा नहीं देखता। मुझे ये लगता है कि जो जरूरत है वो लोगों की ज्यादा है, क्योंकि सरकारें बदलती रहती हैं, हम किसी सरकार पे डिपेंड होके नहीं रह सकते हैं। सरकारें बदलती रहती हैं, सरकारें अपने इंटरेस्ट के हिसाब से कुछ भी कर सकती हैं, वो अच्छा भी कर सकती हैं, वो खराब भी कर सकती हैं। आपको याद है कि अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी और परवेज मुशर्रफ की एक शिखर वार्ता आगरा में हो रही थी। तो उस समय पूरे देश में मतलब इंडिया और पाकिस्तान हर जगह ऐसे पॉजिटिव माहौल बन गया बिल्कुल। अभी आज कोई कहेगा कि हम बात करने जा रहे हैं तो वो मतलब वो अजीब सा ही होने लग जाएगा, क्योंकि वो माहौल ऐसा बना दिया जाता है। और वहीं आप देखिए कारगिल का जब हुआ 99 में, तो उसके बाद जो है वो बस भी शुरू हो गई। उसके बाद वाजपेयी जी ने विजिट भी करी पाकिस्तान पे और सारी चीजें हो गई। भारत पाकिस्तान पड़ोसी बोल रहे हैं कि साथ साथ रहना है, प्यार करें या वार करें, दोनों को ही सहना है। 3 बार कर चुके लड़ाई, कब तक सहेंगे, इस तरीके से उन्होंने उस समय पोयम भी अपनी बोल दी। तो मुझे लगता है कि इन सब चीजों पे हमें सोचना होगा और हमें जो ताकत देनी होगी वो जनता को देनी होगी। जन संवाद को बढ़ाना होगा और जो जनता की ताकत है उसको बढ़ाना होगा। और उसको बढ़ाने के लिए हमें दोनों देशों के बीच जितने ज्यादा संपर्क स्थापित हो सके, चाहे वो वर्चुअल मीडियम से हो सके या वो ऑफलाइन ऑनलाइन, जिस तरीके से भी हो सके, हमें उस संवाद को क्रिएट करना होगा। उसमें इनोवेशंस करने होंगे कि कैसे वो आगे चल सकते हैं। और खास तौर से मुझे लगता है कि जो फ्यूचर जनरेशन आने वाली है, मुझे तो लगता है कि वो मतलब उसका हक है ये, हमारे और आपके लिए तो खाली कहने और करने की बात है, लेकिन जो फ्यूचर जनरेशन है इस सब कॉन्टिनेंट की, उसका ये हक है कि वो शांति के लिए बात करे। उसको उसका हक है कि वो एक नफरत मुक्त और हिंसा मुक्त और हथियार मुक्त सब कॉन्टिनेंट में रहे। तो शांति का भी एक अधिकार है। उस अधिकार के लिए जो प्रयास होना चाहिए वो प्रयास जो है वो करना होगा। नहीं तो इसका जो दंश है, इसका जो विष है, इसका जो पॉइजन है, ये बहुत सारे लोग झेल रहे हैं। और कुछ इसके डायरेक्ट विक्टिम्स हैं। कभी हम जो सीमा पे लोग खड़े हैं, सैनिक खड़े हैं, उनको कई बार लोग सोचते हैं कि नहीं, उनके बारे में हमें कुछ नहीं बोलना चाहिए और ये सारी चीजें। लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि सबसे जो पहला अटैक या पहले जो विक्टिम्स हैं इस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के, वो तो बेचारे वही हैं। वो जो सीमा पे खड़े जवान हैं वो हैं। आप देखिए जिन लोगों ने कोई भी ऐसा युद्ध झेला है या जो सीमा पे खड़े हुए हैं, उनके परिवार या वो लोग कितने हताहत हुए हैं। चाहे वो भारत का सैनिक रहा हो या पाकिस्तान का सैनिक रहा हो, आप किसी सैनिक से बात करेंगे तो वो बताता है कि वो जो जब खड़े होते हैं तो हम उनसे बगल में बात करते हैं, हम बॉर्डर पे बात करते हैं, हम आपस में कई बार वो बीड़ी सिगरेट एक्सचेंज करते हैं और मतलब इस तरह की चीजें होती हैं, उनके बीच की दोस्ती होती है। लेकिन जब वो माहौल खराब होता है तो वो बोलते हैं कि तो फिर हम नहीं, क्योंकि फिर हमारा वो उनको बोलते हैं कि वो हमारा एक धर्म आ जाता है कि अब हमको, मेरा धर्म है यहाँ पे लड़ाई करना। ये धर्म रिलीजन वाला धर्म नहीं है, ये धर्म जो है वो आपके काम करने वाला धर्म है। तो उनका कहना होता है कि फिर हमारा धर्म है कि वहां पे हम लड़ाई करें, और इसलिए सारी चीजें जो है वो उसमें कन्वर्ट हो जाती हैं। और इसके बाद आप देखेंगे कि जो लोग बॉर्डर के आसपास के इलाकों में रह रहे हैं, जो सिविलियंस हैं, तो बॉर्डर के इलाकों में सीज फायर एक आम घटना है जो होती रहती है। तो और सीज फायर आप देखेंगे 2003 में जब सीज फायर पैक्ट हुआ दोनों देशों के बीच, उसके पहले लगभग 3000-4000 सीज फायर वायलेशंस होते थे एक दूसरे की तरफ से। उसके बाद वो पैक्ट होते ही कम हो गए और वो बढ़ के 2020 तक फिर से वापस 4000-5000 सीज फायर वायलेशंस हो गए। अब 2021 में फिर गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया और पाकिस्तान ने डिसाइड किया कि नहीं जी, हम सीज फायर करेंगे। आपका तो एक छोटा सा डिसीजन है कि आपने बस कह दिया कि हम सीज फायर करेंगे। आपने चाहे वो ट्रैक 2 से किया हो या कोई भी बैक चैनल टॉक की हो, आपको लगा हो कि नहीं हम एक दूसरे के सैनिकों को या लोगों को क्यों हताहत करें, तो आप तो 2004 से लेके और फिर बढ़ते 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 2020 तक 5000-6000 सीज फायर वायलेशंस कर रहे हैं। 2021 में आप डिसाइड करते हैं कि आपको सीज फायर करना है, और उसके बाद अब आप देखेंगे तो पिछले 1 साल में बिल्कुल 0 सीज फायर वायलेशन हुआ, मतलब कोई नहीं मरा सीज फायर वायलेशन से। और आप उसके पहले के सालों में देखेंगे तो मैंने देखा है ये आंकड़े कि 18 महीने के बच्चे से लेके और 60 साल के एक वृद्ध तक उनकी मौत हुई है इस सीज फायर वायलेशन में। तो क्या उनका उनका क्या अधिकार था? क्या उनका हक नहीं था? आप ये जो डिसीजन आप 2021 में ले रहे हो, क्या हमारी सरकारें ये पहले अगर ले ली होती तो कितने सैनिक और कितने सिविलियंस की जान बच सकती थी? और ये कोई वार भी नहीं है, मतलब आप वार भी नहीं चल रहे हो, आप बस ऐसे ही मतलब मार रहे हो, तो उसमें सिविलियंस भी मर रहे हैं। और वो कई बार मोल्टार्स के जो गोले हैं वो लोगों के खेतों में पड़े होते हैं। और बच्चे वहां पे खेलते खेलते उनको हाथ में उठा लेते हैं। आप बॉर्डर एरिया में जाएंगे तो आपको ऐसे बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल्स मिलेंगे, किसी का हाथ नहीं है, किसी के पैर नहीं है। तो ये सब जो चीजें हैं, ये इसका कौन जिम्मेदार है, इसकी इसकी जिम्मेदारी आखिर कौन लेगा। इसी तरह जो इसके अलावा जो विक्टिम्स हैं, आप फिशरमैन को देख लीजिए, वो समंदर में मछली पकड़ रहे हैं। अब मैं फिशरमैन से मिलता हूं तो वो कहते हैं कि ये तो हमारे दादा परदादा के जमाने से हम मछली पकड़ते आ रहे हैं, हमें नहीं पता समंदर कौन सा है। वो समंदर तो एक ही है, उसमें कुछ बना बना नहीं हो, ऐसे बोलते हैं। तो समंदर में मछली पकड़ते पकड़ते वो दूर तक चले जाते हैं, और वो दूर जाते ही कभी पाकिस्तान की जो कोस्टल गार्ड्स हैं वो इंडियन फिशरमैन को, या इंडिया के जो कोस्टल गार्ड्स हैं वो पाकिस्तान के फिशरमैन को वो कैच कर लेते हैं, वो पकड़ लेते हैं। अब सिर्फ पकड़ा जाना ही उनका दर्द नहीं है, उनको पकड़े जाने के बाद उनके ऊपर कोई क्रिमिनल ऑफेंस नहीं लगता है, क्योंकि वो सिर्फ एक साधारण मछुआरे हैं, वो कि क्रिमिनल नहीं, तो उनके ऊपर कोई ऐसा ऑफेंस नहीं लगता। लेकिन दोनों तरफ उनको जेलों में रखा जाता है, और ये जो जेलों में रखने का टाइम पीरियड होता है ये कोई फिक्स नहीं है। अगर आपके ऊपर कोई क्रिमिनल ऑफेंस हो और आपको कोर्ट में प्रूव हो जाए तो कम से कम एक टाइम पीरियड आपका फिक्स होगा, लेकिन इनके बीच में कोई टाइम पीरियड फिक्स नहीं है। वो 6 महीने 6 साल कुछ भी रख सकते हैं। अब दोनों देशों के बीच माहौल अच्छे होने होते हैं तो वो कहते हैं हम एक दूसरे के 50 फिशरमैन को छोड़ रहे हैं। वो ऐसे करते हैं कि मतलब वो 20 डब्स बना के छोड़ दिया, वो उनकी मर्जी पे है। तो ये मर्जी नहीं चलेगी, ये जो सरकारों की मर्जी है, हमें इसके खिलाफ बोलना होगा। और ये हम तभी बोल पाएंगे जब हम एकजुट हो पाएंगे और हम इस मुद्दे को, इस मसले को समझ पाएंगे कि ये हमारा अधिकार है। ये कोई मर्जी का खेल नहीं चल रहा है यहाँ पे कि आप किसी भी फिशरमैन को या किसी को भी पकड़ के आप रखे रहो और जब मन करे आप तब उसको छोड़ दो। अभी दिल्ली में फिशरमैन आए हुए थे, उनके लोग वहां पाकिस्तान में फंसे हुए हैं, किसी की मौत भी हो जाती है तो उसकी बॉडी पहुंचते पहुंचते बहुत टाइम लग जाता है। ऐसे यहाँ पे किसी सिविलियन प्रिजनर्स या फिशरमैन की मौत हो जाएगी तो वहां पे उनकी बॉडी, बहुत सारे सिविलियन प्रिजनर्स हैं जो एक दूसरे की कंट्री में हैं। हर साल 300 से 400 लोग, ऐसे लोग जो फिशरमैन प्लस सिविलियन प्रिजनर्स मिला के दोनों एक दूसरे के कंट्री में वो बंद रहते हैं। उसमें से बहुत होते हैं जिनकी सजा पूरी भी हुई होती है, लेकिन कई बार उनको एनओसी नहीं मिल रही होती, कई बार उनका नेशनलिटी का आइडेंटिफिकेशन नहीं हो रहा होता। लेकिन सरकारों के लिए ये बहुत छोटे हैं, क्योंकि करोड़ों की जनसंख्या वाले इस देश में सबसे ज्यादा जो इम्पोर्टेंस दिया जाता है वो खाली वोट को दिया जाता है। अब इनके 300-400 लोगों के वोट उनके लिए मायने रखते नहीं। तो इसलिए इन सब मुद्दों को जो आगे बढ़ाने का काम है वो मतलब वो बहुत ही तरीके से और बहुत शक्ति के साथ, बहुत ताकत के साथ करना होगा। और जो बच्चे हैं आजकल के खास तौर पे, उनको ये बताना होगा। और मैं अपनी बात ये कह के ख़त्म करूँगा कि अभी 14 और 15 की जो मिड नाइट है तो उसमें 1985 के आसपास जो है वो कुलदीप नैयर और आसमा जहांगीर और मोहिनी गिरी और यहाँ लॉली आपा और एडमिरल साहब हैं, वो लोग, सब लोग, तो इन सब लोगों ने, PIPFPD के लोगों ने, इन सब लोगों ने मिलकर एक मुहिम शुरू की थी कि वो मिडनाइट को बॉर्डर पे कैंडल विजिल करते थे। तो वो लगातार चल रही है और वो इस बार भी बॉर्डर पे कैंडल विजिल हो रही है। और उस विजिल के लिए दिल्ली से एक आगाज़े-दोस्ती की यात्रा भी निकली है। लगातार ये 4था साल है, कोविड का 1 साल छोड़ के, कि आगाज़े-दोस्ती की एक यात्रा भी निकली है। और उसमें इस बार 75 पीस एक्टिविस्ट जो है वो देश भर से वो जा रहे हैं और ये मैसेज लेके जा रहे हैं कि हम इस सब कॉन्टिनेंट को जो है नफरत मुक्त, हिंसा मुक्त और हथियार मुक्त वो रखना चाहते हैं, एक दूसरे के साथ प्यार और शांति बांटना चाहते हैं। वो यात्रा भी रास्ते में है और वो बॉर्डर पे जो है कैंडल विजिल करेगी। तो मैं बस यही कहूँगा, और अली सरदार जाफरी साहब से शुरू किया था तो उन्हीं से ख़त्म भी कर देता हूँ कि उनका एक बहुत अच्छा शेर है कि करें ये अहद की औजारे जंग जितने हैं, उन्हें मिटाना है और खाक में मिलाना है, और करें ये अहद की अरबाब जंग हैं जितने, उन्हें शराफत और इंसानियत सिखाना है। तो थैंक यू वेरी मच NAPM और PIPFPD, अपेक्षा और मीरा और सभी लोग और सभी साथियों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
थैंक यू सो मच रवि। एक्चुअली आपने इतनी सारी चीज़ें कही और मेरे दिमाग में भी बहुत चल रहा है इस मोमेंट में। और सबसे पहली वो चीज़ थी भाषा वाली, एंड आई थिंक कि वो इतनी इंटरेस्टिंग है। जैसे अमार और मैं, हम जब बात करते थे तो कई बार, बिकॉज हम ब्रिटेन में थे तो हमारे दोस्त अलग अलग भाषा के भाषा बोलने वाले थे एंड इंग्लिश वो कॉमन लैंग्वेज था जो सभी को आता था, लेकिन हम इतनी बार बात बात में हम उर्दू, हिंदुस्तानी, हिंदी वो वाली भाषा में शिफ्ट हो जाते, और हम हमारा चल रहा है और बाकी के लोग बोल रहे हैं हेलो, लाइक हम लोग भी है इस कॉन्वर्जेशन में पार्ट, लेकिन कई बार ये इट वाज लाइक मन होता था कि नहीं इस भाषा में बात करना है, बिकॉज वो ऑटोमेटिकली वो एक जुड़ाव वाली फीलिंग कि नहीं इस अजीब देश में हमारी भाषा बोलने वाले कोई और भी लोग हैं. एंड यू नो इट वॉज सो इंटरेस्टिंग बिकॉज हम ऑफन इसके बारे में बात करते हैं कि हम भाषा एक ही बोलते लेकिन हमारी स्क्रिप्ट्स अलग है. तो वो भाषा वही है, लिखेंगे लेकिन वो लोग अलग और हम अलग, तो हम पढ़ नहीं सकते एक दूसरे को लेकिन सुन सकते. तो हाँ, मतलब ये मोमेंट्स ऑफ डिफरेंस एंड सिमिलैरिटी और इसको कैसे नेविगेट करना है वो एक कांस्टेंट आई थिंक जर्नी है, एक्सपीरियंस है. और आप जो ये जूम क्लासरूम कॉन्वर्सेशंस की बात कर रहे हो उससे मुझे तो बहुत ही होप महसूस हो रही है, बिकॉज हाँ आई थिंक कि अगर जब तक हम फिजिकली नहीं मिल पा रहे तब तक यही सही, एटलीस्ट इतना तो हो. सो थैंक यू सो मच फॉर शेयरिंग दैट एंड फॉर शेयरिंग कि एक पीस कॉन्वॉय है जो बॉर्डर पे जा रहा है और ये कर रहा है. प्रियंका, आई थिंक यू आर रेडी नाउ. हाँ,
Yeah, I'll probably just keep cutting a little bit in between if that's okay.
ठीक है, गो फॉर इट.
So, yeah, thank you. And I think that's very beautiful what, Aghaz-e-Dosti been doing, because that becomes also so important for on-ground work and people to be able to meet. Because unless people meet, how will that understanding develop and how will trust develop? Right now, also, for example, there are 3 Padyatris who walked all the way from Pune to Pakistan, and they're planning to celebrate 14th of August in Lahore, and then they'll return to Delhi to celebrate 15th of August here. And so, yeah, that's lovely. And so everything that Ammar spoke about and everything that, Apeksha, you were referring to when you were referring to the family. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you fine. हाँ.
Yeah, so I have personally never been able to visit Pakistan. Unfortunately, there was one time when we were going to visit. That was back in, I think that was 2006 for a cricket match series, and I still have the visa on my passport, but that something happened and I was not able to visit. There was another time when something when I was close to visiting and it just somehow did not happen. But I remember, and I remember that particularly when you referred to that, when you were using that idiom of family. And this is some analogy, but I remember having made up as a child, probably. I don't remember when. So when you're looking at 2 neighbors, if you're just looking at 2 families or 2 homes, so there are so many different dynamics that go on within each, within homes and families for that matter. That, for example, Ammar was referring to trauma, unaddressed trauma that goes on. What we see here particularly is that there's this constant, the hysteria that surrounds Indo-Pak relations and the constant refrain that happens where this relationship is weaponized to a great extent, not just by political entities, but also by the media. So this constant refrain of anybody who raises their voice and they're told to go to Pakistan, and particularly, in cases when that happens, who belong to particular religious communities where that happens. And similarly, it plays out everywhere in Pakistan as well, or people who are raising questions, very fundamental questions relating to economy, society as such. So any dissent to just sort of curb that, people are told to go to Pakistan or you go to India or you're an agent of either countries. And it's kind of is very silly, because when so that doesn't happen, right? If you're looking at 2 neighbors, if anybody starts fighting, like if something goes on, you don't ask one person to go. I mean, that just does not happen. The whole idea of uh, wanting to some sort of a struggle that plays on something that goes on in our minds. We don't go about shouting. So when we're talking about, I'd like to actually talk about moving beyond the identities of nationality, but just speaking in terms of the identity of nationality, which would when we refer to that. So when we see, if you imagine two homes, if you imagine two families of neighbors, there are different equations going on in every place. It's a reciprocal relationship. So every individual's relationship with the state is also governed by their experiences. So when you referred to, when we're talking about freedom, there are also unfreedoms that need to be talked about. So whether it's the case of the Delhi pogrom, where the activists who were who were protesting have been incarcerated, or whether it's the case of Bhima Koregaon, where people have been incarcerated just because they were raising voice against the state. So there is a relationship which every individual's relationship with the state will differ, right? Where people experiencing oppression, their relationship with the state will differ from another individual who is benefiting from the state in some way, or who probably has not experienced oppression to that extent. So that's one part. And this is just something that I got reminded of when you were referring to the family. But in that case, you don't go about shouting in the home adjacent to yours that, we are greater than you, or, so like somebody like, so your relationship, we have our relationship, everybody has, so there's that relation that plays out within a home, but that does not play out in the sense that, my family is the best. You don't go out and start shout. You don't want to go out and jump into another home and start shouting that, oh no, and my home is the best, or my thing is the best. So that, which is what strangely happens here. There's this constant, very perverse, I wouldn't say a competition or a contest, because it is not even, it's not even that. There's a strange hysteria that surrounds, which again, not just in terms of the political establishment, but also in media. For example, I remember I came across this news report which was trying to whip up, it seemed to whip up this hysteria around the Indus water treaty, which fortunately has been something that has continued despite despite the disturbances that have been occurring. This was on some media channel which I do not remember, which was talking about how that's something that should be leveraged. So the whole weaponization of that of the relationship, which is sad and unfortunate, which then also connects to that shared history and the shared past that Ammar was referring to, in terms of that trauma which is unaddressed, events of partition. Partition in itself was perhaps not even just an event; it was a process. Because when we talk about India and Pakistan, we're not talking about Bangladesh today, but it was also part of that entire process. And so Aanchal Malhotra's recent book, it's very heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. It shares stories of people, and I remember reading one of the stories where that migration continues well into the 1990s. So people are going and coming back, and that going and coming back, that goes on well into the 1990s. So partition also, I think it's just probably important to also start viewing it not just as an event, but as a process, because it informs the way we, the way we have these conversations, the way things go on in the present, the shared history that we're referring to. So there is a shared history, of course, not just the shared colonial past, but also before that. And, the way in which we're so closely intertwined culturally, socially, economically. And yeah, so when we also talk about language and food and dressing and everything, that's also perhaps a little more centered, like North India a little bit. There are, so it is, but it is there nonetheless. There is a shared history, so there is that shared history, this struggle. So, for example, where do we place if we start talking about identities like this in terms of India or Pakistan, where will we place somebody like, say, Bhagat Singh? Like, he died before partition happened, but which identity does he carry then? He's celebrated, his life is celebrated on both sides. Or even when Gandhi was assassinated, which happened after the partition, but I remember having read at least 4 to 5 editorials or columns which were published in Pakistan Times at that time. Editor was Faiz Ahmad Faiz, which were an expression of grief. And it's not just the shared history, but there's also a shared present. So, and referring to something from the popular culture probably now, which just came to my mind. So there is a singer, Sidhu Moosewala, who died in India. And I remember reading reports of expressions of grief in Pakistan. And one of his very popular songs is Doso Pachanve. So that's 295. And which is referring to the law, so that, I mean, so there's 295A in India, but there is 295C. I think it is 295C, which is the past law in Pakistan. So that the legacy of the colonial past is also informs, the relationship to a great extent. Or if you look at sedition, the law. So that colonial legacy is also informing the past, and there is that shared present. And in all of this, when the trauma that Ammar was referring to. So again, going back to so this is a book because I recently read it, so it's just coming to me right now. This is talking about griefs and the many types of griefs that people experienced, the survivors of partition in particular. So there was the grief of leaving one's homeland, which is a deep grief that remains unaddressed. So, where do people who had to leave their homeland, when we talk, because if we start talking about identities, which identities do they hold on to, and which one do they leave? Like Ravi mentioned, Reena Verma visited Pakistan now after, I think, struggling to get a visa for a really long time, which is so sad and unfortunate, because there was a process earlier which was then not allowed. Just one moment. So that sorry, I'm sorry, I was referring to, yeah. So there's that, which identities do we carry? At any point, like even in our life, in our day-to-day lives, right, we carry multiple identities. Nationality is but one of those many identities. But why is it there are forces, organizations, individuals who stand to benefit from placing this identity as the primary identity? Because there are not just the government or the state establishment or media, corporate media, or even the the military industrial complex. There are people who stand to gain from placing this identity. So how do we counter that? And so like SAPAN, because I was mentioned, I have been volunteering with, and there are many people here who are very closely involved with that as well. So because we're also South Asians, I mean, beyond that, we're also citizens of the world. We're also, there's a lot, but there is also a broader identity that binds us together. In terms of our shared history, our shared present, in terms of the commonality of our struggles. Ravi was referring to the fisher folk. And I think the discussion was titled something like "Pani ki koi sarhad nahi hoti." So there is that, to be able to actually stress and emphasize that what ties us together is always going to be so much more than what can ever divide us. That becomes so important. That's where stories become important, human stories become important. So work like what Aaghaz-e-Dosti is doing, or what the pilgrims who walked to Pakistan, what they are doing, or just efforts to bring people together. Which, so for example, at SAPAN, what's been happening is that there are monthly events where, on different issues, where people join from across South Asia, which always brings home the point that there's so much that's tying us together. Even in matters like something. So there was a recent event which was a discussion on road crashes, for example, which again highlighted not just the commonality of the issue and all, but also in this, things like how the road infrastructure, when we're talking about again South Asia, so how road infrastructure and vehicle composition and things like that are similar, and how the region needs to address these issues collectively, and so how that would be better. And then there's also, so there is that. And when you're talking about South Asia, the relationship between India and Pakistan, it holds importance because it in many ways has been holding hostage the peace process in South Asia. So there's that. Going back to what I was referring to, the griefs, the griefs that partition survivors, the types of griefs of the partition survivors that Anshul Malhotra had referred to in the book. So there's the grief of leaving homeland, which is a particularly, with something which is unfortunate and sad. It continues. So it's not something partition. When I say that it was not an event, it's a process, because that grief is something that people still carry, not being able to visit their homeland. The grief of the lives that were lost, of course. And also something that was expressed in many of the stories was about the fear of the unknown, or something about what will happen. Is it something that could repeat? Something like this could repeat. So in today's context, in today's India particularly, when we look at this, it's very disturbing, honestly, because where the kind of narrative that is being built, or the kind of politics that plays out, the kind of conversations that are played. Sorry, this is not on my side, right?
It was probably my mic. Sorry. Go on. But maybe if you want to like rap a little bit. Huh.
So I think just to wrap up, what will be important is to again emphasize that nationality is not the only identity that we carry. There is I'll probably just share the link if it's possible. So many organizations have come together to call upon governments to ease visa restrictions. I know Aaghaz-e-Dosti is also part of it. PIPFPD is part of it. SAPAN, many organizations, nearly 20 organizations, calling to ease visa restrictions, because what becomes important is for people to be able to meet, for freedom of travel and trade to be enabled, to foster that, those relationships. And then to just to make hate not profitable, for hate to not be profitable, for a time when it's probably not politically expedient for people to play up these identities and these differences. And actually, when Ravi referred to Ali Sardar Jafri's Nazm, so that Nazm was interestingly in response to a Nazm by Ahmad Faraz. So it's Dosti Ka Haath, and I think both are called Dosti Ka Haath. So If I could just end with that, maybe. अब उनकी तीरा नसीबी चराग चाहती है, जो लोग निस्फ सदी तक रहे अंधेरों में, चराग जिनसे मोहब्बत की रोशनी फैले, चराग जिनसे दिलों के दरियार रोशन हो, चराग जिनसे जिया अमनो आश्ती की मिले, चराग जिनसे दिए बेशुमार रोशन हो. So that was by Himad Faraz in response to it. I'll read that. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Yeah, actually, I feel like you've raised a lot of really important points that I really wish for us to all be able to talk about. Uh, I think the one that really spoke to me is how do we grieve some of these identities together? How do we make space for all of these different identities? How do we make space for the loss? Because I mean I've been thinking about this a lot in general, that South Asians don't do a very good job of grieving in general. I think we're I think culturally we're a little bit stunted in that department. I mean, I don't know other cultures who are able to do it, so I'm not just like South Asians like are bad at this kind of thing, but I also see that all the time we're in need to grieve various kinds of losses of self, of other, of connection, of things. But I think that we're unable to do so. I think we're unable to have a language in which to be able to grieve together. um, and I think that, yeah, like all of that ungrieved pain comes out in these in these really harmful ways. It's like what Ammar also said, that the pain of the Holocaust comes out on Palestinians, and we've been doing the same thing in our own nations. So yeah, I really do feel that maybe we need to stop ritualizing grief and instead talk about what it means to grieve, what it means to experience loss, what it means to hold that loss together. I think that's a really important part of it. And then, as Vedi and Sumant put it so beautifully, ki ultimately to let it go so that you can love. No, because I think that that's the whole point, right? That eventually that loss is preventing you from loving more fully and loving parts of yourself more fully. So how do we make space for love and let go of that pain also? And I really also was wanting to talk about that point Ravi made earlier, कि जिन्होंने देखा है पाकिस्तान, या जो पार्टीशन सफ़र भी किए हैं, उनके दिलों में नफ़रत नहीं है. सो द नफ़रत इज सम it's some kind of convoluted I don't know, like child of a pain, and is being planted categorically, weaponized, as you said, manufactured, to ensure that we don't grieve and love. And how do we speak of love more directly, more clearly, more uncompromisingly, and like without being, I don't know, dragged to the ground for loving. Okay, so until now, Ammar has been the only Pakistani holding fort in this conversation, but Abida has joined us. And I know, Abida, you're traveling and so also have very bad internet. But I think maybe let's open the floor, and at some point, Abida, if you would like to pitch into the conversation, we'd really love to hear from you. Thoughts, reflections. Or uh, in the chat if you would like to write instead. जी अशोक जी.
बहुत ही अच्छा लगा, क्योंकि जब ये बड़ा दुर्भाग्य की बात है कि हम विदेश की धरती में हम दोस्त थे और अपने ही देश में, अपने देश के दोनों मुल्कों की धरती में हम दोस्त नहीं बन पा रहे, वो बड़ा दुर्भाग्य की बात है। और जब मैं भी बाहर विदेश में गया तभी जो पाकिस्तानी दोस्तों से जो हमें एक वो हमेशा बोलते हैं कि आप तो हमारे बड़े भाई, हम छोटे भाई है, और भाइयों में क्या झगड़ा नहीं होता है, होता है। तो बंटवारा हुआ है तो वो सलाह मशवरा भी होगा। तो एक सलाह मशवरा वाला और प्रेम वाला भाईचारा वाला, और हमारे जो भी हमारे कल्चर, जैसे वो भाई साहब ने बहुत अच्छा बताया, क्योंकि मैं गुजरात से हूँ, और ये जो फिशर folk का जो मुद्दा है भारत और पाकिस्तान के जो फिशर folk, और उसमें मैं पिछले 30-40 साल से हम लोग लगे हैं। तभी लगता है कि ये क्या, वहां तो कोई ऐसी सरहद की लकीरें तो है नहीं, सी क्रिक में वो पाकिस्तान वाले को पता नहीं है, यहाँ वाले नहीं है। दूसरा ये जो सिंधी और हमारी कच्छी जो डायलेक्ट है, वो इतनी सिमिलर है कि बोलो, तो क्या हम ऐसा कुछ कार्यक्रम करें या कुछ गतिविधियां करें कि वहां से जो हमारा जो समन्वय और सातत्य है, चाहे वो संस्कृति का हो, भाषा का हो, नाच गान का हो, संस्कृत हमारे संगीत और कला में, तो ऐसा कुछ हम करके कोई एक भाईचारा का बड़ा संदेश कर सकते हैं। क्या ऐसी कोई उम्मीद है? क्योंकि हमारे देखो, हमारे पंत प्रधान जी बिना न्योता वहां पहुंच गए थे उनकी बर्थडे में, तो वो एक है, चाहे कितना भी सियासत का जो भी मामला होगा, मगर बिना न्योता वो उनको मुबारकबादी देने के लिए पहुंच गए थे हमारे नरेंद्र भाई जी। तो वो जब ये सब लोग कर सकते, तो हम क्यों एक साधारण नागरिक, या हम एक हिंदुस्तानी नागरिक या पाकिस्तानी नागरिक, हम क्यों साथ में नहीं आ सकते? और इसके लिए हमारे जैसे लोगों की बहुत अच्छी उम्मीद लगी हमें आपकी बात सुन के, और जो दूसरे साथियों की बात सुन के, क्योंकि हमारे तो देखो अभी 60 साल हुए हैं हमें, हम और कितने 15 साल या 20 साल रहेंगे, मगर एक नई पीढ़ी में ये जो उम्मीद जगी है, वो कुछ न कुछ आशा लेके आएगी, ऐसा मुझे लगता है। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू अशोक जी। सुहास, आप कुछ कहना चाहते हो?
हाँ, आप सभी को धन्यवाद और बहुत बहुत प्यार। हेलो, मुझे वीडियो का कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ रहा है, इसलिए मैं स्टार्ट नहीं कर पा रही। हाँ, तो मुझे याद आई, मैं भी जब लॉस एंजलिस में थी तो हमारे लैब में एक पाकिस्तानी डॉक्टर लवीजा करके आई, कहीं सुनती होगी तो मुझे फिर से कांटेक्ट करना अच्छा लगेगा। और वो बोल रही थी कि मुझे हिंदुस्तानी नहीं आती, और कुछ मतलब जो उर्दू हिंदुस्तानी हिंदी में जो कॉम्प्लिकेशन है, तो मैंने उसको बोला ठीक है, तुमको जो भी जुबान आती आप बोलिएगा, मैं समझ लूंगी। और हमारी बहुत अच्छी दोस्ती हुई। एक 14 अगस्त को भी हमने साथ में बिताया और काफी अच्छी दोस्ती रही। आफ्टर वो शी मैरिड एन इंडियन, तो अभी मुझे मालूम नहीं कि वो कहाँ है, यूएसए में है या, तो मैं जरूर मिलना चाहूंगी। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू। आई थिंक ये अपने आप में इतनी खूबसूरत चीज़ है कि जितने लोगों ने ऐसे रिश्ते जिए हैं अक्रॉस बॉर्डर्स वाले, वो बस अपनी कहानी बताते रहे, और उससे ही बहुत होप मिलेगा कि हाँ, ये वाले प्यार भी पॉसिबल है, ये वाली फैमिलीज भी पॉसिबल है। ये अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ी बात है। और कोई साथी अगर शेयर करना चाह रहे हो? Lolly Akka wants to speak, I think.
I think Ramu Ramdas आपका हाथ ऊपर है.
Okay. Yeah, we are creating some confusion because I'm using his computer, he's using my laptop, because sometimes we're connecting on one, sometimes on the other. So just very briefly, I mean, this has been very exciting, as I said right at the beginning. What I wondered is, before you wind up today, is it possible that each one, particularly the participants, might like to actually flag one or two doable, practical kinds of activities, events, a thematic that we want to follow? Because very often we share a lot of what is moving us, but I think what we need, and I'm coming from 40 years of activism and still we're fighting the same battles even now. What is it that we can perhaps suggest? How do we try and increase the number of people who would be interested in these kinds of conversations? As I said, I sent this message out yesterday to nearly 100 of people that I know. I had 2 responses, both saying, wonderful idea, but sorry, we can't, we are not free. But somewhere I feel that we need to get this back onto the front burner to make this a burning concern of a huge number of people. Not just because, okay, people like us have a number of different reasons, including a very, very personal reason. And that's a story I do intend to talk about, but in another forum, not now, of having, as I said, a daughter of a very senior service person in this country fall in love with a Pakistani in a college in America. And you know, what that has meant actually, and also how it has meant that we have loved each other, got to know each other, our sambandhis from across these borders. But that's, as I said, another time. But if we can have, concrete things that we can do, and especially reaching out to young people, because that's a story that I think we are hearing today. And wonderful. And thank you again, Meera and NAPM and all of you who have really done such a great job.
I want to say something.
Oh, okay. I think Ramu also would like to add something. Here we are.
It is a splendid performance by all who shared their, personal events. They always make good stories, and they're always very moving. And my wife has just told you some of the things that she wanted to say, and she has said so. Well, while she has been at it for nearly 4 decades, I've been at it for many more decades also. It's just that I feel so happy to see there is this tremendous sense of oneness and feeling to be together. You don't think it is possible, but I think it is possible. Many times we have always felt slightly low. It's like, going up in a trough at sea and then coming down and then going up again. I mean, these things keep happening in life. But I think I want to congratulate all of you for participating. I know many of you personally, and you're all, even some of you, I'm sure, are younger than my granddaughter. So this is something I'm very proud of, and I would like to see this continue, because there is no permanence about any of these things. It will become nice, and inshallah it will become very, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Inshallah, indeed. Okay, so going with Loli Akka's suggestion, do we want to close this with closing statements from all the panelists, because it's also 8, and maybe if people have last sentences that they want to share, and then we can wrap for the day. Yeah?
Apeksha, I think Fawzia wanted to share something at the beginning.
But she is
Yeah, she
not?
is here. Fawzia,
she is?
Yeah, she is there. Also, Guddi has been trying real hard and she's been having an internet issue.
Yeah, it's really sad actually. Even Shahram is
Right, both
had
of
to
them.
drop out. I'm not seeing Fausia on my screen.
Fozia, in case you want to share something, you can please unmute.
Oh yeah, now I do. Sorry. Fausia, would you like to share something? Hmm. Okay. So then, Ammar, Priyanka, Ravi, do you guys want to have closing statements?
Yeah, I think everything has been said. I'm really happy to have listened to all your thoughts today, and hope we can have these at a greater scale, and hope more friends from Pakistan can join next time. And I think one thing we really need to try and do is figure out like neutral places until such time as the visa regimes are normalized. Figure out neutral places where we can meet. Like I know of some very good instances of I know there's some feminist collectives or South Asian feminist collectives that have been meeting in Nepal for the last few years. I don't I've forgotten the name, but obviously some of my own friends and comrades have been there. See, like Tuba and other people from Pakistan, and I know they formed like really meaningful, lasting connections. And I feel like these are going to aggregate over time, which is great. And so I think we need to make use of these spaces, Nepal, Sri Lanka, places where we can both visit and have like these large conclaves there. And you know, these have been happening amongst like a lot of these like central. There's that Park India, the Chopraya dialogues and things like that that have been happening. But I feel like there are not enough movement actors that are having these dialogues within in the South Asian sort of sphere. So we should make more use of that. Whether it's PPIFD, whether it's NAPA and other collectives in Pakistan, we should figure out like these. Uh, we should try and meet more in these neutral spaces, and then come up with like more concrete forms of action that we can translate back into movement work, and ultimately leading up to. And I think one of the main objectives over the next few years should be really the normalization of visa regimes and enabling this sort of contact, and so that more people can form these lasting connections. I know it might seem politically unfeasible, but everything seems politically unfeasible at one point in time. And you know, we may as well start somewhere. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure, and hope to continue these conversations.
Thank you, Ammar. Priyanka, Ravi, you guys want to say something?
सो आई थिंक कि हमें बस लड़ते रहना है, बढ़ते रहना है, चलते रहना है, और ये जो पीस कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी है उसको किसी ना किसी तरह बढ़ाते रहना है। बहुत सारे लोगों तक पहुंचने की कोशिश कैसे कैसे की जा सकती है, जैसे अम्मार ने कहा, बहुत सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं जो डिफरेंट प्लेटफॉर्म हैं वो काम कर रहे हैं। सपन जैसे एक पूरा कोएलिशन है बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का और लोगों का, वो काम कर रहा है पूरे साउथ एशिया को लेके। तो इस तरह डिफरेंट जो प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं उनके साथ हम कितने ज़्यादा लोगों तक पहुंच सकते हैं, और लोगों के बीच ये मैसेज कितना पहुंचा सकते हैं कि दरअसल पीस इज आवर राइट, शांति जो है, अमन जो है, वो हमारा अधिकार है और उसको हम लेके ही रहेंगे।
Thank you, Ravi. Priyanka?
Yeah, thank you. Share meeting, I think it's already been mentioned, to be able to actually talk and meet and share these stories and be able to preserve that memory. There are forces, there are individuals, organizations who are already at work trying, history is being rewritten in so many ways, to be able to sort of just how the struggle against power is often the struggle of memory against forgetting. So how to be able to preserve that memory and to be able to keep sharing those stories. And I think a very workable and doable suggestion that Ammar mentioned, which was about finding neutral places where those meetings can happen. Because I think one more reason why like Zoom fatigue is a thing. I know there are so many interesting conversations on Zoom, which I am not able to attend because it's too much of Zooms happened. So to be able to actually meet and interact becomes important, and share those stories becomes important. Also, actually share the link for visa campaign if anybody would like to go through that. And just on that note, if I could, I'll just end with something that Sahir. So there's this plasm called Parchaya, which is it's a powerful and beautiful dance. So just कुछ आशार है उसके कि चलो कि चल के सियासी मुखामरों से कहे कि हमें जंग जदल के चलन से नफरत है, जिससे लहू के सिवा कोई रंग रास ना आए, हमें हयात के उस पैरहन से नफरत है. So I think that's all we can do. We can keep sharing and keep talking and keep meeting. And hopefully there would be a time when it is not politically expedient to play up and whip up hatred in the name of these identities, and recognize that there are also many more identities, which brings us closer together. Is Vedi here? I was wondering if we could have like a song.
I also really wish, but I think they are at the event organized for Umar's incarceration. So they wanted to join back, but I don't know if they'll be able to. And I think to close off, picking up from where you left off, Priyanka, I think that
Apeksha, sorry, just to interrupt. Guddi is on the phone and she's trying to speak over WhatsApp. So should we just try if that sound is clear? I just connected her over phone.
Okay.
So maybe she can just speak for a couple of minutes and we see. Guddi, तुमको आवाज आ रही है?
जी, मुझको सुनाई दे रही है मेरा.
Are you able to listen to her voice? अपेक्षा उधर आवाज आ रही है?
हाँ,
Yes,
आ
we
तो
can
रही
hear.
है, हाँ.
हाँ, yeah, Guddi, I think you can proceed.
मैं देरी से जुड़ने के लिए माफी चाहूंगी. मैं जिस जगह हूँ वहाँ पर नेटवर्क का इशू है और मैं आप सबका ज्यादा समय नहीं लूंगी. मुझे पता है इस पैनल में बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग थे जिन्होंने बहुत उम्दा बोला होगा आज. मुझे सिर्फ एक दो चीजें जो कहनी है, क्योंकि मैं जिनके साथ काम करती हूँ वो फ्रीडम मूवमेंट के अंदर शामिल रहे. उनकी उम्र 98 है और आज जब मैं इस संवाद के लिए उनसे बात कर रही थी तो उन्होंने मुझे सिर्फ एक चीज कही कि विभाजन का दर्द जो है वो हम जो लोग हैं जिन्होंने विभाजन देखा है उनको बहुत दर्द होता है उस चीज का, और आप लोगों ने सुना है तो वो दर्द थोड़ा कम महसूस होता है. इसीलिए हम लोगों को जो हमारा पड़ोसी मुल्क है जिसके बारे में आज हम बात कर रहे हैं और हम ये कहते हैं कि अमन के लिए, शांति के लिए हम एक दूसरे को आवाजें दें, एक दूसरे के साथ चले, तो ये बहुत जरूरी है कि जो एक चीज इतिहास में हुई है उसको हम याद रखें और उसको याद रखते हुए ये याद रखें कि बंटवारा जमीनों का हुआ, दिलों का नहीं हुआ. तो दिलों को जोड़ने के जितने भी मौके और आए हमको वो करते रहना चाहिए. आज हिंदुस्तान और पाकिस्तान दोनों ही जगह अंदर की स्थिति बिल्कुल एक जैसी है और उसमें अगर हम अंदर अंदर लड़ेंगे तो हम किस तरीके से आगे बढ़ेंगे इसको एक ध्यान रखने की जरूरत है. एक आखिरी बात, आज हम जो ये कहते हैं कि जो महाताते महाशक्ति पूरे विश्व के अंदर हैं, जिनके लिए आज हमारी बुनियाद हुई है, तो हम हमारे रिसोर्सेज कहाँ खर्चा कर रहे हैं वो देखना चाहिए. मुझे लगता है कि इन दोनों मुल्कों को अपने युवाओं पर, अपने यूथ पर सबसे ज्यादा तो मुझे लगता है कि उन संसाधनों को खर्चा करना चाहिए और इन दोनों ही मुल्क के युवाओं को अमन और शांति के लिए सतत काम करना चाहिए. सिर्फ इतना ही मुझे कहना है और मैं माफी चाहती हूँ एक बार फिर से कि मैं बहुत देरी से जुड़ी.
थैंक यू गुड्डी. मैं बहुत होप कर रही थी कि मैं तुम्हें देख पाऊँ. सो आई कैन शी हियर मी? आई डोंट नो.
हाँ, आई थिंक शी कैन. गुड्डी सुन पा रही हो ना?
जी मैं बिल्कुल सुन पा रही हूँ.
ओके. हाँ, मैं बहुत होप कर रही थी कि आप जुड़ पाए, बट नहीं हो पाया, बट हो थैंक यू। जो आपने कहा है वो बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट है, एंड आई थिंक मेरे भी क्लोजिंग थॉट्स वही होने वाले थे, तो उसको लेकर मैं क्लोजिंग में ये जस्ट कहना चाहती हूँ कि जो प्रियंका ने कहा कि नफरत पॉलिटिकली एक्सपीडियंट नहीं होनी चाहिए, मुझे लगता है कि वो हमेशा होगी, बट इसीलिए हमारा प्यार का जो व्हाट यू कॉल इट, एक जज्बा है वो और पावरफुल होना पड़ेगा और कांस्टेंट होना पड़ेगा, ताकि उस नफ़रत को जीतने ना दे। तो आई थिंक इतनी सिंपल सी बात है जो आह्वान के गानों में भी थी और हमारे कल्चर्स के रूट्स में भी है, एक इंसानियत की बात और एक मोहब्बत की बात, एंड अल्टीमेटली आई थिंक वहीं पर जाकर बात रुकती भी है और वहीं से शुरू भी होती है। सो थैंक यू सो मच कि आप लोग सब जुड़े और टाइम निकाला, और शेयर किया आप अपने बहुत सारे स्टोरीज, एंड लुक फॉरवर्ड टू मोर ऑफ दिस इन द फ्यूचर।
Thank you.
थैंक यू मीरा कनेक्ट करने के लिए।
थैंक यू, थैंक यू, थैंक